I have a story here on our Kentucky about a Laken Snelling. With that being said, let's get into it. And shout out to Scandal by Laken.
Kids or communities or each other. Count on us to show up. Nellie is very inquisitive and eager to learn, and she has just blossomed in the NC Pre-K program. I think it's a good mix of structure, but also still free play. They do a lot of different activities. Since Nellie started NC Pre-K, just her confidence has skyrocketed because she can be more anxious. I think she's going to go into kindergarten feeling a lot more confident. Nellie loves to learn, and free NC Pre-K is helping her reach her potential. North Carolina education lottery dollars from this to this. How did a University of Kentucky cheerleader find herself arrested within the first few weeks of senior year? Investigators say it's because of a shocking secret she kept inside of her closet that came to light in the most harrowing way. This is Scandal, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Sierra Gillespie. Senior year of college is time to live it up. And for one-time beauty queen Laken Snelling, that meant cheering at the University of Kentucky, choreographing dances with her friends and posing for photo shoots with her boyfriend. But all of that quickly came crashing down when Laken was arrested late last month, and the allegations against her are disturbing to say the least. Today's episode of Scandal takes us to Lexington, Kentucky, home of the University of Kentucky. That's where 21-year-old Laken Snelling was a senior this semester, pursuing a degree in interdisciplinary disability studies. Now, Laken was originally from White Pine, Tennessee. That's just outside of Knoxville. She went to Jefferson County High School there before graduating and heading to UK to officially become a Wildcat. Laken found her place there pretty quickly, joining the cheerleading stunt team. And after Laken's allegations came to light, this was corroborated by the university in this statement, quote, "We can confirm that she has been a member of the stunt team for the last 3 seasons. All other questions should be directed to the Lexington police." Now, why would all questions need to be directed to police? It's for the allegations that came about in late August. We'll get there. In the weeks leading up to Laken's arrest, she posted to social media in the same way normal college girls her age do. Pictures with her friends, videos of her dancing and lip syncing, and even what looks like photo shoots. These specific photos have been called into question following her arrest. They show what appears to be Laken and her boyfriend, and what some are saying is a maternity photo shoot. So did Laken know she was pregnant? Was she planning to keep the baby and raise them on her own? And if so, why did she do what she allegedly did?
Yeah,
Another TikTok
why?
shows things about Laken's appearance and personality. Things like her eye color, her hair color, her favorite season, her favorite color. But what really stands out in retrospect is the emoji under the word goals. You can see what appears to be a mother holding a baby, indicating that one of Laken's future goals is to become a mom. And that happened, but not in the way one would hope. On August 27th, Lexington police were dispatched to a home on Park Avenue for reports of an unresponsive infant. They arrived to find a baby wrapped in a towel and black garbage bag placed in the closet. Investigators say Laken admitted she'd given birth to the baby and then attempted to clean up the evidence of her delivery. Lexington police have since confirmed this, releasing in a statement that Laken Snelling is in fact the mother of the baby. Several days later, on August 31st, Laken was arrested. She was charged with multiple counts, including abuse of a corpse, tampering with physical evidence, and concealing the birth of an infant. Now, right away, a lot of us are wondering, why isn't there a murder or manslaughter charge? We'll talk more about that in the interview, but I do want to note that the Fayette County Coroner's Office has not yet released the baby's official cause of death. Now, because of the Labor Day weekend, Laken was held for multiple nights in the Fayette County Detention Center after her arrest. She made an initial appearance in court on Tuesday, during which time she entered a not guilty plea. She was
Okay.
released on $100,000 bond.
Should
And
have been more than
according to
that.
People magazine, she's now on home incarceration with no ankle monitor, planning to live
Now, if this was a black woman, she would never been on house arrest. Just saying.
That's where the case is at right now, but I want to take a closer look at the facts as we have them. So for that, let's bring on today's guest. It's former prosecutor and author of Open Bar, a new book about sexual misconduct allegations on college campuses. It's Dan Shore. Dan, thank you for coming on with us. And I want to walk through the entire case, but the question that is burning in my mind, and I'm sure in our viewers, is why is there no murder charge right now?
I think a lot of times prosecutors have to look more into the facts of the case and determine whether or not there was an intent to kill the baby or was there some kind of other negligent act. So there might be a manslaughter charge. And also a lot of times prosecutors have an initial charge and later they can supersede the charges with a new indictment. So a lot of times in these cases, as they're doing the investigation, and I've been in that situation as a prosecutor or law enforcement, will have an initial charge and then they may reevaluate that after, and they'll also potentially engage in plea bargaining, and that could dictate whether or not they have enhanced charges later on.
And I know as of right now, we don't have an official cause and manner of death for the baby. This is something that medical examiners and professionals are taking a closer look at as the investigation moves forward. Do you think that would assist if prosecutors want to bring an additional charge?
Absolutely. The manner of death is really important to a case like this. It might not change from homicide to non-homicide, although it could, but a lot of it has to do with intent of the mother. Was it a situation where she didn't get proper medical attention after birth? I mean, there's a reason why in the modern world people generally give birth in hospitals with doctors and a lot of people care for a newborn baby and the mother. So if she did this alone at home, it might not have gone well. It might have been a tragic outcome, but it might not have been an intentional killing of the baby, or it could be a situation which, unfortunately, I've seen in cases I've handled where someone did not want to be a parent, and after the birth, they did kill the newborn baby. So those are very different possibilities and have very different repercussions in terms of charges and sanctioning and sentencing and things like that. So the autopsy is really important for that.
You just mentioned it there, and prior to our reporting, you and I were talking about this. You said you covered a couple of other cases like this. I, in my time in law and crime, have covered so many I don't even actually know the true number of women who have given birth, and then it seems that they're trying to mask this up, cover it up. I reported on babies in garbage bags, just really terrible things that we have to talk about. I mean, so this is I don't want to say common, but this isn't the first time we've heard of something like this, right?
Right. So one of my first roles, I was in the Queen's DA's office in New York City, and I was in the Homicide Bureau, and I investigated cases like this where we had newborn mothers, very young, and they were tragic deaths of babies, and some were intentional, some were not, but they're cases that have to be investigated, and they're really important, but they're complicated because it's hard to find out what happened, what the timeline is. You need an autopsy done. So those are all issues that law enforcement tries to figure out, but it's heartbreaking every time you see it.
Oh, it really is tragic to have to talk about a case like this with a life so young that was lost. And I guess that's really important too, is the timeline in all of this, right? Because if it is unfortunately a stillborn baby that, didn't take a breath after being delivered, that's the difference as opposed to a baby that was born, breathing, crying, and then is killed by the mother. Is that something that investigators really are going to pay attention to, what happened at the time of delivery?
Absolutely. It's critically important if you're looking at it from a prosecution standpoint and also from the defense. What did this new mother do after the birth? Was it, again, a situation where there just wasn't the proper medical care around because she was in her home and the baby tragically died, or was it more of an intentional act? But we do see these cases, and I know that some areas of society are trying to encourage more people who are reluctant to give birth and don't want to have a termination of pregnancy to educate them about resources for after they give birth, such as adoption, things like that. So hopefully you can discourage people from taking acts like this to cover up a pregnancy. A lot of these cases that I've seen are also about people not feeling comfortable sharing with other people the fact that they're pregnant, whether it's their home life maybe wouldn't be receptive to talking about that, or their social circles, and that often puts societal pressure on people to take terrible acts. And none of that is an excuse, but I think that those are some factors in the minds of a young pregnant person, and unfortunately leads to tragic cases like this.
I guess that was one of my questions when I'm going through. I mean, you brought up a good point. This could be a home birth. I know multiple mothers who have elected to give birth at home rather than a hospital. We don't know the details yet. But when I was just reading through that, that didn't even cross my mind. I thought about a young woman, probably because I work in true crime and have covered other cases like this, but I thought perhaps it's a young woman who doesn't want her parents to know that she's pregnant. Maybe that's what happened, and then she tried to go and cover up all of this. And that's why I'm wondering if this isn't the case. Again, we don't know yet, but if this is the case where she didn't want people to know that she was pregnant, she wasn't ready to be a mom, why not just do adoption? I mean, that's a viable option. A lot of us know about it. We probably know somebody who's been adopted and lived a happy, healthy life. I mean, why cover up the birth rather than put the baby up for adoption?
Right, well, you raise a lot of important issues there. I mean, one, if law enforcement's accurate, and we have no reason to believe they're not, there was a cover-up of the death of this infant because the infant was found in a closet. So clearly, someone who has let's say they just tragically had a death while they're giving birth at home, most people are not going to then obviously cover up the death in a closet. So there was a cover-up here. Did the cover-up begin with the pregnancy? Why wasn't this mother aware of options such as giving the baby up for adoption or other options? We don't know, but people, as you know, and you cover a lot of cases for law and crime, people do a lot of things that are unethical, problematic, hurtful, tragic to other people, and then we wonder why would they do that. But unfortunately, in the real world, people do a lot of things that we find really upsetting, really tragic, and it's hard to always find an explanation, even though we want to. And I think it's great that your program and others on law and crime tries to figure out so we can understand, both from a legal perspective and a human perspective, why people do these things. But unfortunately, sometimes it's really hard to get an answer because you can't get inside someone's head. But certainly, law enforcement is investigating that to try to understand what charges to bring and ultimately what sentence there should be.
I think you're right that when I just see the headline and then I take a deep dive into the case, I do want to know why. I want to know what happened leading up to this and then after in the moments following. And I'm sure that's what our viewers want to know too. And, you know, we're talking about one of her charges is in relation to tampering with physical evidence because we, of course, have the baby that was found wrapped in a towel, then in a trash bag, then put in a closet. To me, that is some sort of concealment there. And also, I see, when I'm looking through all of these facts, consciousness of guilt. The fact that something went wrong. Now we're putting this baby physically into a closet,
very
in
much
a trash
so.
bag, throwing it away as if it is trash and not a human life. So as a former prosecutor, does that scream consciousness of guilt to you?
100%. Now the question is, guilt of what? There's certainly consciousness of guilt by putting a baby in a closet. Was it consciousness of guilt because they hadn't told anyone they were pregnant and they thought they could somehow have this birth at home and it went really bad and they're trying to cover it up then? Or was it that the person actually took intentional acts to kill the child because they didn't want that child to ever be known by anybody? That is a different kind of cover-up. So, but absolutely, I have a friend actually who a few years ago, and she had a plan to give birth in a hospital, but just it happened so quickly she had to give birth in her home. But if it had gone, unfortunately that birth turned out fine, but if it had not, I'm sure she wouldn't have been hid the baby in a closet. So that's not going to be a reaction of people who feel that they've done everything they can to do the right thing. So there's certainly consciousness of guilt here, but how extensive that guilt is, we don't know yet.
Right. To me, this doesn't seem like it was very well planned out because sometimes you hear women who are pregnant, they're saying, okay, we're planning to have a home birth. We have, you know, the blow-up pool, or we have whatever it may be. They take those preparations in any event of whatever would happen, and you don't hear about babies in trash bags or in closets following that because it's just disgraceful to even think about. Let's actually go through the charges too because there are multiple that she's facing right now. Abuse of a corpse. This one makes sense to me, the fact that we have the baby in the trash bag. What do you make of that charge? Is it appropriate?
Right, it's certainly appropriate, and it's not going to be the most serious charge of the charges, but yeah, that is definitely a charge here. The homicide charge is going to be more serious, but it's definitely appropriate for them to add that charge also.
And pairing it with tampering with physical evidence, does that kind of go to the same sort of charge?
Absolutely, and a lot of times we see in cases the adding of the tampering charge, but it's unlikely if someone is convicted. I know that's a long way down the road, but you're usually not getting consecutive sentences for the homicide and the tampering of evidence. Usually it would be concurrent sentences, especially if someone doesn't have a prior criminal record. So I think it's totally appropriate to charge tampering, and I've charged that in many cases, but in the end, it's probably not going to, in any significant way, change the ultimate sentencing. That's really going to come down to the nature of the homicide conviction, if there is one.
Right, and again, these are very early on in all of this. It's been about a week since this happened, so who's to say what the later charge could be? This last charge that we have, as of right now, the time of this recording, was interesting to me. I don't know that I've seen it, and it could be a jurisdictional thing based on the fact that this happened in Kentucky. I've covered other cases similarly, but they happened in New Mexico, so perhaps they don't have the charge. But the charge that this woman here, Laken, faces is concealing the birth of an infant. That was kind of an interesting charge to me. Have you heard about that one?
No, I did find that interesting also, because that's not a charge I've seen. I was a prosecutor in New York. I hadn't seen that charge, but that might be something that's state-based. And again, I don't see that as something that would add to ultimate sentencing, but usually it's standard for prosecutors to charge every violation of the law that they see, and then that could be part of leverage for plea negotiation. And it also, maybe they want to highlight certain offenses that they think are important, but ultimately it's probably not going to change the ultimate sentence in this case.
Yeah, perhaps in Kentucky there's something like when you give birth, we need to make sure that the baby is listed. You know, we have the social security numbers and everything, so they're in our registry. Maybe that's what it is. It is interesting to kind of see it in there when you and I are talking about the potential for a homicide charge down the line. Maybe, again, this is speculation, but I could see that coming down the pipeline. I wanted to talk about one of the things we do know for sure that happened is that there was a 911 call, and that's why Lexington investigators first arrived there. There was a report of an unresponsive baby. Now, according to the reports I got, we haven't seen who called 911. There's still a lot of questions. I mean, you and I have been speculating this entire interview about what happened. But let's just say for argument's sake that it was Laken, the mother herself, who called 911. Is that a positive when it comes time for her defense, where she's the one who says, okay, time's up, I need help?
Absolutely. If her explanation is, I hadn't shared with people that I was pregnant, I gave birth, I didn't know what to do, I panicked, I didn't have medical attention with me, this baby died, and I didn't know, I put the baby in a closet because I was just terrified that I would get in trouble, but then when I reflected on it, I realized this was a major mistake and I called to get help. That would be a really, if that's all true, then you wouldn't see a homicide charge in this case probably. So I do think that that is a very important argument that the defense can make, and it may be based in truth, we just don't know yet. But certainly calling, getting help is something that's significant here.
That'll be interesting to see because, again, we have a few basic facts. The release from Lexington Police was pretty straightforward, but it didn't give too many details. And so maybe that's something that she did discuss with, investigators. We just don't know at this time. Another thing that we're speculating about is, of course, everyone's going and looking at her social media after all of this. And there are a couple of peculiar posts. There's one that looks to be with her boyfriend. It almost looks like a maternity photo shoot that she has, her belly and her hands on it. I mean, it could just be the way that the photo looked, who's to say, but some people speculate maybe that was a maternity shoot. And then in another post she had, it was essentially talking about her future goals, and it was a little picture of her with a baby, or excuse me, an emoji of a mom with a baby saying, okay, one day I want to be a mom, one day I'm hoping to be a parent. Those things, is that something investigators would look at and maybe highlight for prosecutors talking about motherhood potentially?
Yeah, I can see that being used by the defense actually. If the allegation is that this mother was intentionally killing her baby or somehow trying to hide a pregnancy and make sure no one ever knew about it, they might come back and say, no, she was excited about being a mother, she was posting about it. This birth at home, which was, they could argue, unexpected, went tragically wrong, and she panicked. I can see that being used by the defense as an argument because it might play out that way, but we don't know. I mean, it's really interesting to consider how that would play out. In so many cases I see where social media is a major part of showing consciousness of guilt, showing intent, and showing what someone was planning. So more and more the social media posts, text messages are used in these cases.
Social media, I mean, that's really what makes long crime go right. For our cases, because people live such front-facing lives, and I'm not pointing fingers. I have an Instagram. I mean, I post pictures of myself on vacation or whatever it may be, but that's kind of how we get an inside look because someone's life. She was a cheerleader, that she was involved in beauty pageants in a way, so we can kind of see her at least on the surface level. But I'm wondering about investigators, you mentioned text messages, if they're going to dive a bit deeper than the surface and go into her texts, her call logs. Maybe she has a journal. I know that sometimes first-time mothers, they, go through, okay, I'm in the first trimester, here are my symptoms, if that's the case, she was doing it, or even who she's talking to. Were there other people who knew about the pregnancy? Are those all things that are up for grabs for investigators to take a look at?
Definitely. I think who she was communicating with in the hours before and after the birth are extremely important. It shows the state of mind, it shows intent, it shows planning. And then, look, anyone who's pregnant in the modern world with modern health care available is going to, during the pregnancy, get some type of meeting with a doctor, whether it's a sonogram or checkups. So was any of that done? And that's a really important thing also when you're looking at whether or not this is a pregnancy that she was trying to hide with the possible intent of hiding the birth by killing the baby, which would be one extreme side, or the other side might be no, this was a pregnancy that she was excited about, but for some reason she ended up giving birth at home, went tragically wrong, and she panicked, but then realized later that she needed to get assistance. So I think those are the two extremes that we're talking about, and that type of information, text messages, social media, can be really relevant to showing which one of those is more accurate.
I think you're doing a great job, Dan, of highlighting we don't know which way this is. Is this a mom who wanted to give birth and had this terrible tragedy happen at a home birth? Or is this someone who was concealing her pregnancy and purposely killed a newborn baby? And those are two possibilities, and I'm glad that you're highlighting that we don't exactly know what's going on. One of the things, again, that we do know is that she pleaded not guilty to the charges that she does face for now and was released on $100,000 bond. What do you think about that bond number? Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I mean, it might even be a little high because I would suspect that she's not a flight risk. We don't know of any criminal history here. The type of crime here is not something where you would see her as thinking that she would be a safety threat to other people. So I think in those cases, generally you don't see a high bond. It's a reasonable bond, but certainly I wouldn't expect anything higher if she doesn't have a criminal record and there's no reason to think she's a flight risk or a threat to other people.
Talking about her background, a potential criminal record, things like that, I know that investigators are going to look into those things, and something that will be highlighted by her defense, let's say, she has no priors, etc. Do you think something the defense would also point to could potentially be her young age? The fact that she is in school, that's always a positive, something that we see. She was going to be a senior at UK, so okay, she's trying to further her education. But additionally, she's 21 years old, and yes, that is an adult. However, you and I probably can both say, when we were 21, we were a little bit different than we are now, after the frontal lobe is a bit more developed, Do you think that that's something the defense would say, okay, she's still young, she's still trying to figure it out, things like that?
I'm sure they'll say it. I don't think it's very persuasive because I do think 21, I totally agree, we're at different stages of our lives. We know more, we learn more, but 21 is an adult. You really can make major decisions. You're not even an 18-year-old, which is technically an adult. But I interview college students for my investigations all the time on college campuses, and there's a major difference I see between the first-year students who are 18 and the seniors who are 21 and 22. Just a major difference in maturity, understanding. So I think by 21, there's little sympathy for being too young to appreciate what's happening. Nevertheless, absolutely, the defense is going to raise that, just like you outlined, because they are going to try to point to this being a young person who might not have appreciated the significance, but I don't think that's going to be very successful for them.
I feel like it's something we have to talk about or address because all of us who are older than 21 know the differences between your early 20s and, let's say post 25 or late 20s. But additionally, you are over 18, you are an adult, and you do need to be held accountable for your actions. So, I mean, it's a double-edged sword there. My last question for you, Dan, thank you for giving us so much of your time, by the way, but my last question is, what are your thoughts on this case? Where do you think it's headed from here?
Well, the big thing is the autopsy, the findings, the manner of death, and that's going to be extremely significant. And as we've talked about, what was the communication that this woman was doing before the birth, after the birth, then that goes to show also, was this an intentional act? Was this a tragic incident that she then handled poorly after the tragedy? That's a major difference. So I think those are the factors that law enforcement is going to try to find out more details about, and especially the autopsy results are going to be very significant here.
I mean, I think The bottom line is it's a troubling case all around. It's a tough one to have to talk about. So Dan Shore, thanks for coming on with us and talking us through it.
Thank you. Thank you for covering this. It's a really important story, and it's good to talk to you.
It's unclear what's ahead for Laken Snelling. More charges could be coming down the pipeline, but for now, we know she's due back in court at the end of the month on September 26th. That's where today's episode of Scandal leaves us. For all the latest
I'll be
in
right
this
back.
case and all things true crime, make sure to subscribe to
Here's
our
the
channel.
second part.
You can also new details in the case of a one-time cheerleader now accused of literally throwing away her newborn baby in a trash bag. Mystery still surrounds the cause of death for her son, but we're learning more about her alleged serial bullying personality. This is Scandal, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Sierra Gillespie. Ever since we first started reporting on the Laken Snelling case, that's all anyone can think about. How could a young girl who seemingly had it all literally throw away her newborn son in a trash bag? We first reported on this story earlier this week when news of Laken's arrest broke. She's accused of giving birth to a newborn baby boy, then wrapping up the baby in a towel and trash bag before putting the body in the closet. And that unto itself is shocking. But pairing with Laken's social media presence, the fact that she was a senior at the University of Kentucky, a cheerleader, a former beauty queen, it just doesn't seem like something this kind of person would do. So immediately, we want to know why. Sadly, that's still an unanswered question, and so too is the cause of death of her newborn baby. On Thursday, investigators revealed the cause of death was inconclusive, saying that more tests are needed to know exactly what happened. A statement from the coroner reads in part, quote, "I understand the community's concern and sensitivity surrounding the death of a child. We are conducting a thorough and methodical death investigation to ensure all facts are carefully considered." What we do know, the baby boy was born on August 27th, and that Laken Snelling is confirmed as the birth mother. Now, all of this happened in Lexington, Kentucky, where Laken was studying at the University of Kentucky. She was pursuing a degree in interdisciplinary disability studies and was a senior this semester. Laken was originally from White Pine, Tennessee, which is just outside of Knoxville. There, she went to Jefferson County High School. Now, since news of her arrest broke, we've learned more about Laken's life pre-arrest. One of her former classmates told the Daily Mail, quote, "She was obsessed with her appearance, very obsessed with being popular and fitting in." This former classmate went on to say, quote, "Laken had many people that she took her personal anger out on. My sister was one of them. While in high school, she tried to run over one of my closest friends with her Jeep. The bullying got so bad, my friend had to be pulled out of school and transferred to another because Laken had taken it so far."
Oh, she was a mean girl.
At UK, where she later joined the cheerleading stunt team. After Laken's allegations came to light, this was corroborated by the university in this statement, quote, "We can confirm that she has been a member of the stunt team for the last 3 seasons. All other questions should be directed to the Lexington police." On August 27th, Lexington police were dispatched to a home on Park Avenue there for reports of an unresponsive infant. They arrived to find a baby wrapped in a towel and black garbage bag placed in the closet. Investigators say Laken admitted that she was the one who gave birth to the baby and then attempted to clean up the evidence of her delivery. Lexington police have since confirmed all of this, releasing in a statement that Laken Snelling is in fact the mother of the baby. Now, several days after all of this, on August 31st, Laken was finally arrested. She was charged with multiple counts, including abuse of a corpse, tampering with physical evidence, and concealing the birth of an infant. Now, Laken was arrested and held at the Fayette County.
Why can't she try to get help for the baby?
She has since been released, though. Just this week, she appeared in court to enter a plea, and a lot of people made note of her appearance. She was wearing a red dress, a full face of makeup, and bright red lipstick. And according to reports, her father also appeared in court there with her. At this time, Laken entered a not guilty plea, and she was released on $100,000 bond. According to People magazine, she is now on home incarceration with no ankle monitor, planning to live at home with her parents back in Tennessee. But meanwhile, there are still so many questions about the case. A lot of people are looking back at Laken's posts in retrospect that now seem to be kind of telling. For instance, these photos have been called into question after her arrest and charges came down. They show what appears to be Laken and her boyfriend in what some are saying could be a maternity photo shoot. Another TikTok shows things about Laken's appearance and personality. It's things like her eye color, her hair color, her favorite season, her favorite color. But under the title Goals, you can see what appears to be a mother holding a baby, indicating that one of Laken's future goals is to become a mom. This is something a lot of people are now talking about. Well, there's still a lot to make sense of in this case, so let's bring on today's expert guest. It's criminal defense attorney John Day to break down this shocking case. John, thanks for coming on Scandal with us today. And I guess let's start with the newest information, right? That the cause of death of this newborn baby is inconclusive. I mean, what does all that mean?
Great, sir. Thanks for having me. What that means is the coroner, law enforcement, still has no idea whether this was, for example, a stillbirth situation or there was a death after the baby was born alive. That's so important because that's going to determine if there are additional charges filed in this case. Right now, the charges are tampering with evidence, concealing a birth, and abuse of a corpse. There's no homicide-related charge yet, and so much is going to depend on what the coroner finds, if they can determine anything else other than what they've done in this initial review. Determine anything else other than what they've done in this initial review.
Why do you think that is that we don't yet know? I know that this just happened. It was about a week ago, so I'm sure they did, the basic tests, but now they have to go back in and do even more in-depth tests, I guess. Is it normal to have a first cursory route of tests just come back inconclusive like they did?
The short answer is yes, it is normal in this type of a case. I've done a number of these, and the initial review, the initial autopsy might not show certain things that the pathologist or coroner wants to go and look at in depth. It certainly indicates that there's more information that they've got to gather. A finding of inconclusive at this point, not that surprising. They've got a lot more testing to do. But of course, this is what's going to determine this young woman's fate with the justice system, whether the charges that exist now are going to stick or whether prosecutors add something that's homicide related.
And I know it's hard because we want these test results, boom, immediately. So many of us have questions about it, but I guess I even have to remind myself, this isn't CSI Miami. Things don't happen, in the arc of an episode. We want to make sure we're getting it right because these are very serious charges that this young woman could be facing. And I guess that's one of my
And
questions
they are.
is why don't we right now
Very serious
have any
charges.
sort of murder or homicide charge? It's just kind of hindering on this test.
Right, well, there's still nothing that would enable.
Well, I do see negligent homicide.
Anything that they could use as a hook to say, all right, we believe that this was a situation where this infant was born alive and then died at the hands of someone or something else. We don't know that. Again, it's not terribly unusual to have that occurring at this point in time in case it's so new. So the initial review obviously showed something to the coroner, but they didn't have enough information to say to a prosecutor, there's criminal culpability here. And there's so many, facts around this case are so, it's tragic, it's sad, but at the same time, there's a lot more that needs to come out from law enforcement. They've got the initial statements from the young woman. They've obviously looked at the scene and they've gathered what they can, but I'm not terribly surprised that we haven't heard anything more conclusive yet. Again, this is something that obviously is drawing a lot of attention. It draws a lot of attention in a state where, for example, abortion is illegal. So that's one of the factors that plays into what's going to happen if there's a charging decision based on the laws of that jurisdiction.
And I think this is drawing a lot of attention because, unfortunately, this isn't the first like this. I personally have covered multiple other cases where there have been women who've been charged with murder because they have a baby and then they're later convicted of killing this newborn baby. And I think that's where a lot of people's minds jump when we hear the horrific details of a newborn in a trash bag. But is it possible that this young woman just wanted to give birth at home, in the comfort of her own home, and then had a stillborn baby? It's, she's young, she's about 21 years old, she didn't know what to do, and that's why she thought she'd clean it up. I mean, is that something that could have happened?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've seen those. I mean, the justice system over these years, I've handled cases like this before. What underlies all of them is it's tragic, first of all. It's you have a dead baby, whether it's born alive or dead, you still have a tragic situation. So that's sort of the starting point. But at the end of the day, you have to remember that states around the country are trying to implement that would say, for example, if this is a child that's born alive, there are things you can do, there are places you can go. There, literally baby drop boxes at fire stations and hospitals to try to improve the chances of a baby who might not be wanted like that. So again, there's so many things we don't know about this. We can look back on cases that are similar. As you said, we've seen a lot of these in the past. This one's drawing a lot of attention because, there's a cheerleader aspect, there's a college student aspect, there's this. The context is here's a young woman in this world of a collegiate environment where you would expect that there would be resources, right? The question is, why did someone take advantage of those resources? What did she know? I mean,
And that's the thing that gets me here. Just from what I'm hearing about this young lady, she does seems like a young lady who has, who has access to resources. So it's not really not like she was struggling. So, I don't know what's going on.
personally handled cases where young women have given birth and their statement is, I didn't know I was pregnant. On the face of it, it may seem absurd or ridiculous, but once you start digging into the facts, you realize that this is a situation that does happen. I mean, it's rare, but you can't sort of paint a broad brush with all these cases and say they're all going to fit the same pattern. Of course, this one, tragedy, is compounded by the fact that the whole country is now paying attention to what happened, and everybody obviously wants to know what the situation was, because it is a tragic situation of a dead infant. Was it born dead, or did it die after it was born? And again, that's the key factor.
Your severe asthma says you can't. Tespire says you can. Tespire is
Come
an
on.
allergen that
Die
There
after
we
it's
go.
born. And again, that's the key factor.
Right, that's what we all want to know for, prosecutors with this field additional charges. We, the public, want justice for this young baby boy, but also just to play devil's advocate. I mean, she's in her early 20s, so yes, she's technically an adult. However, I go back to myself in my early 20s, much different than I am now. I mean, people who are older think, okay, yeah, they're still kind of a kid at the time. So maybe that's what it is, that she's just this young woman, and I'm saying woman because she's older than 18, but maybe just didn't realize really what was going on. To your point, I didn't know I was pregnant. There's a whole TV show about it. However, on the opposite side of things, we do know she was a senior in college, meaning she'd gone through higher education, nearing graduation. She should be educated enough to know, okay, yeah, I'm missing my period. Okay, yes, if I am pregnant, there is adoption, there's foster care, there's all these other options. And again, these are questions we just don't yet have. But to your point, so many people are watching this story. They're taking a closer look because we want to know. This was a beautiful cheerleader. She was a beauty queen. Why did something like this happen? And so there's a lot of questions about her. Even this week appearing in court, she was dressed up. A lot of people are talking about what she was wearing. She was wearing a red dress. She had red lipstick. I mean, why do you think so many people are focused on her appearance right now?
Right, well, again, look at the context of this. A lot of the times, and maybe I'm generalizing, but a lot of the times these situations occur, it's maybe a young teen mother, it's someone who is much younger than this, who is facing that situation, is not in an environment where there are resources, maybe, a high school student or someone who's in a socioeconomic situation where they don't have access to certain services or information, and maybe that's one scenario that we see. And what triggers people's interest in this one and concern is that, as you said, it's someone who's in a college environment. It's someone who can
From this to this. New details in the case
Lord,
of
where
a
was I?
one-time
Hold on.
cheerleader.
Where was it? There we go.
It's maybe a young teen mother. It's someone who is much
Sorry
younger,
about that,
who
y'all.
is facing that situation. Is not in an environment where there are resources, maybe a high school student or someone who's in a socioeconomic situation where they don't have access to certain services or information. And maybe that's one scenario that we see. And what triggers people's interest in this one and concern is that, as you said, it's someone who is in a college environment. It's someone who can show up in court looking well put together, and that sort of is a contrast with what the situation was. And again, if we look at what I think of as sort of the more common, and that may be a generalization, but the more common reports we get are young, unwed, scared teen mother who gives birth, who doesn't know what's going on, doesn't have access to health care. And then you contrast that to this with you can't ignore the collegiate cheerleader aspect, apparently a collegiate athlete too in that environment. So the question is, what sort of information, what sort of resources, what sort of support would you have had versus, say, a young woman who is in a much different social, economic situation?
And I think a lot of the things we can't ignore too are the social media aspects in all of this, because she was a young woman. It's so normal to have Instagram, TikTok, have a front-facing life out there. And now that she's facing these charges, we, of course, the public, are, clamoring to see more. What was she posting? What was she like? And some of the posts indicate that potentially it looks as though she was having something like a maternity photo with her boyfriend. Now, it could be she just happened to have her hands on her stomach like this, who's to say, but some people now are saying, it kind of looked like she was pregnant and emphasizing her baby bump. And in a different post, it was basically her future goals, her dreams. It was a picture of a mom holding a baby, indicating, okay, yeah, one day I do want to be a parent, I do want to be a mom. And now we know what happened. She became a mom, but not, in the daydream type of thing. This is much different. This is probably more of a nightmare scenario. So I guess I'm asking about what she posted on social media. Is this something investigators would look at, prosecutors, maybe even the defense?
Social media is going to be, for both sides, could be a gold mine, whether you're prosecuting this case or defending it. And so, this is the world we live in, and if you are going to have those kinds of posts, if you're going to be having that public face, we see it all the time. When something tragic happens 2 months or 6 months or a year later, suddenly you're going back and people are finding these posts, they're finding what the person has said, what they're, how they're, what that moment in time looks like, and then you contrast that to the tragedy that we're looking at right now. So that's one of the issues that's going to be that both prosecution and defense want to look at. There obviously is a backstory here, and the backstory is going to be much more detailed, much more significant than what we know now, just based on these initial reports. Both the prosecution and the defense in this case, even if the charges are simply as they are now, original homicide charges, both of the sides are going to want to know what was going on in the life and the mind of this young woman that led up to this point. If you're defending this case, obviously, you want to know what are the factors, the mitigating factors that led her here. The prosecution, less so concerned with that, more concerned with, in their view, we have a victim, whether stillborn or not. So both sides are going to be digging into this young woman's past. That's just
Yes, it could.
And you know that if you have a public image that you project to the world through social media, someday if things turn badly for you, you have to understand that is going to be something that people are going to be digging through, and it's going to be a source of important information. So while it's great to be posting things showing how happy you are at that moment in time, the problem is down the road. Those things could come back to haunt you.
The internet lives forever, whatever you post. And I know it's easier said than done, but you really have to think through what you're posting. And I'm not casting stones here. I post stories on my Instagram, and I post pictures of me on vacation, and whatever it may be. But it is something that, as you said, investigators are going to want to look back at the background. Where was she? What was her state of mind? And it's interesting if we're digging into her background, because now, of course, as this case is getting a lot of publicity, people are coming forward who knew Laken in her past. And one that's really making the rounds is a young woman who knew her in high school and called her a serial bully. Basically said she was so mean that some girls had to transfer schools out of our high school because the bullying was so severe. Now, I know this is unrelated relatively to the charges that she's up against, but is this something that their side would look at, how she treats other people in the past?
Well, certainly that's going to be something that if there's information out there that's relevant both either to the prosecution or the defense, they want to get that. But yeah, this is not unusual. Someone is in the midst of that kind of a tragic situation. I mean, everything that has gone on previously, especially if some people see this as a chance for payback, whether or not it's justified, I suppose, that's always going to come up. But in this particular case, I did see all that. I was reviewing all that information that was coming up about her past, and also the information about the photos that she was posting, about the social media image that she was projecting. And so, there is, when something like this happens, there's this sense of, well, maybe you got what you deserve, but you have to remember the context is there's an infant who's not alive. Now, whether that was through natural causes or something intervened to the child's future, we don't know yet. We will know more. I think it's pretty clear that more is going to come out, but you have to look at this whole situation in the context of how unusual it is. A obviously well put together young woman in court who, so that's a contrast to the allegations that she committed these crimes, whether it's the abuse of a corpse, the tampering with evidence of concealing a birth, or it's something much more serious. We'll know that pretty soon. Ready? I think so. You think so? Well, Mark's yes, no answer. Mark Kerr, a man on a mission. Be much more serious. We'll know that pretty soon.
You're good to remind us the bottom line in all of this is that there was a young life that was lost, and that's really what it is it's a tragedy. That's why so many people want to know more about what happened, because, birth is part of life. It's a miracle, literally, and then to see a life cut short so soon, and that's the real question here, right? The timeline of when it did happen. Now, we talked about going into Laken's background, whether it's high school or college or whatever it may be, but I know that investigators also are going to want to know what happened, when she gave birth, as we've discussed, afterward, when she was, concealing it. Again, these are all allegations at this time, but we do know that Lexington police have said this baby was found wrapped in a towel and then in a trash bag, hidden in the closet. And to me, when I'm just reading those exact facts, a baby in a trash bag in a closet, to me, I'm seeing some sort of consciousness of guilt here. The facts that it was hidden. It was put in a closet. It was in a trash bag. It was wrapped up. What are your thoughts about that aspect?
Right. That is a point that the prosecution of law enforcement is going to be focusing on. And I think we have to keep that in mind. On the other hand, if you are involved in defending a case, one of the things you want to do is you're going to need a lot of expert help in your defense to establish things like what goes on in the mind of a young woman who's scared, doesn't know what's going on, or what does giving birth do physically and emotionally, and what sort of effect does that have on making decisions in the moment? These are all things that are going to have to be gone into. It doesn't necessarily mean it's definitive, but the other part of that is that you can't get away from the fact that of the contrast of who this young woman presented herself publicly, what her situation was. Another thing that the investigators are going to want to know, and I think the defense as well, who did she talk to about this, if anybody? Did anybody else know? Was anybody else aware or conscious of what was going on? Was there a father involved or knowledgeable, family members, close friends, other young women who were associated with her on these teams at the school? Did this happen in a vacuum? Did she not tell anybody? And if she didn't tell anybody, what does that tell us about her state of mind? And is there something deeper that we need to know about in terms of, say, prosecuting or defending her? So I think that the people that were around her, the people who would be that she'd be talking to, or about her? That's going to be
Great questions. As we talked about before, did she literally not know she was pregnant? Did she tell her mom? Did she have doctor's appointments? Because that's something we'll of course be able to corroborate if she was going to the doctor for, whatever week checkup it may be, then she did in fact know that she was pregnant. Who did she tell? I mean, all great points they were bringing up. We talked about potential consciousness of guilt with all of this, but I'm also wondering too, the fact that someone called 911, somebody had to report this. We don't know who, but I'm wondering and speculating perhaps if it was Laken herself, and she said, okay, wait, something went wrong here. I gave birth. Let me call 911 for help and let me report it. If that's the case, is that positive for her? The fact that she reached out and said, okay, this has gone too far. This is out of my hands. I need help, and is reporting it.
It could be very positive on her part. Again, we just don't know enough about the circumstances and her awareness and what was her state of mind. I mean, there are defenses to these crimes that involve her state of mind and things that were going on like that. And if they're not defenses, then they are certainly mitigating factors. And if she winds up in a courtroom, then a defense team is going to want to put in front of a jury. But at the end of the day, the facts that we have now are going to be, we're going to get more. We're going to get more information. We're going to know more once the coroner and pathologists are done with their sort of their subsequent evaluations. And we also know that police are obviously digging through her world right now to see, address the questions you just asked about, did she talk to family members, talk to medical people, talk to clergy, talk to friends. That's all going to be really important. But again, at the end of the day, this just highlights what a tragic situation this was, and obviously something, no matter what, we think this could have been avoided. But how could it have been avoided, and what steps could she have taken, and why didn't she?
I keep tossing all these questions at you, and you're doing such a good job of saying we still don't know. We're all speculating, and we all have all of these questions. I guess one of the things that I'll end on that we do know, she's pleaded not guilty to the charges that she does face right now, and she is released on a $100,000 bond when living with her family in Tennessee, according to reports. What are your thoughts about all of that, the bond amount, and what's ahead in this case?
I don't think that's inappropriate given the circumstance. I mean, this is not a, the reason you keep people in custody are things like, are you going to flee? Are you a danger to the community? Clearly, the judge in this case decided that it was safe to release her, go back to your family. There's a bond holding you in place. But I think it also addresses the fact that this was the circumstances. I don't think
I'll be right
that
back.
was necessarily inappropriate or outrage making, but I do think that this is a story that is just unfolding, and we don't know nearly enough at this point. We will know a lot more, but you can understand the interest nationwide in this young woman who seemingly has it all together, cheerleader at a prestigious university, young, whole life ahead of her. Something like this happens. The question is why.
The question is why, and that's something we still don't know. Still so early on in this case. So John Day, I appreciate you coming on Scandal with us today and breaking down what we do know. We'll definitely have you back on when we learn more. Thanks for stopping by. This is for sure a case that we'll keep on following to see what is ahead. We still have questions about the baby boy's cause of death, his manner of death, and whether homicide charges could be in Laken Snelling's future. What we know for sure right now, though, is that she's due back in court on September 26th. And that's where today's episode of Scandal leaves us. For all the latest in this case and all things true crime, make sure to subscribe to our channel. You can reach us via email at scandal@longcrime.com and find me personally on social media like Instagram @SierraGillespie. That's all we've got for today's episode of Scandal. Thanks so much for watching. I'm your host, Sierra Gillespie, and I'll see you next time. Newly uncovered video shows a visibly pregnant Laken Snelling cheerleading just months before she gave birth. Meanwhile, the mystery still remains. Who was the father of her baby? Two star college athletes could be the father, and one of them has already given his DNA to police. This is Scandal, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Sierra Gillespie. The twists and turns just keep on coming in the case of Laken Snelling, the collegiate cheerleader accused of literally throwing her newborn son away in a garbage bag late last month. If that wasn't shocking enough, the newest scandal is now coming to the forefront. We're not sure who the baby's father is. And because there is a crime involving the baby's birth and death, that's something police are going to want to know. According to multiple reports, there are two likely possibilities for who could be the father of Laken's baby. First, there's 21-year-old Isaiah Hall. Isaiah played quarterback at the University of the Cumberlands in Williamsburg, Kentucky. Now, we don't know the exact timeline of his relationship with Laken, but according to the New York Post, they dated before she got with her most recent boyfriend. And Isaiah has reportedly been cooperative with investigators throughout all of this, too. His father told the Post, quote, "Lexington police had him come down to the station to give a sample. I don't know anything on this, and we don't know if Isaiah is the father or not." But there's another possibility for the father, too. Basketball player Connor Jordan. Now, Connor attended a few different schools, including Tusculum University, Lincoln Memorial University, and King University. New detail. Newly uncovered video shows a visibly pregnant Laken cheerleading just months before she gave birth. Meanwhile, the mystery still remains.
Why would they let her? Never mind.
Her baby. Two star college athletes could be the father, and one of them has already given his DNA to police. This is Scandal, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Sierra Gillespie. The twists and turns just keep on coming in the case of Laken Snelling, the collegiate cheerleader accused of literally throwing her newborn son away in a garbage bag late last month. If that wasn't shocking enough, the newest scandal is now coming to the forefront. We're not sure who the baby's father is. And because there is a crime involving the baby's birth and death, that's something police are going to want to know. According to multiple reports, there are two likely possibilities for who could be the father of Laken's baby. First, there's 21-year-old Isaiah Hall. Isaiah played quarterback at the University of the Cumberlands in Williamsburg, Kentucky. Now, we don't know the exact timeline of his relationship with Laken, but according to the New York Post, they dated before she got with her most recent boyfriend. And Isaiah has reportedly been cooperative with investigators throughout all of this, too. His father told the Post, quote, "Lexington police had him come down to the station to give a sample. I don't know anything on this, and we don't know if Isaiah is the father or not." But there's another possibility for the father, too. Basketball player Connor Jordan. Now, Connor attended a few different schools, including Tusculum University, Lincoln Memorial University, and King University. Since news of Laken's arrest broke, Connor has deleted his social media, but prior to that, on Laken's account, there are multiple pictures of them together. It's unclear when they started dating, but they were in fact together leading up to her arrest. Now, prior to all of that, Laken was a seemingly normal 21-year-old woman. She was set to be a senior this semester at the University of Kentucky, where she was studying interdisciplinary disability studies. The fall semester started on August 25th, and it's kind of unclear whether Laken actually went to any classes this semester, but we can now confirm she has dropped out and is at least taking off this semester. But before all of that, Laken was part of the university's stunt cheerleading program for about 3 years. Prior to her arrest, Laken posted a lot of pictures and videos of her in her cheer uniform, and a lot of people are now specifically talking about this video. You can see in that video what appears to be a baby bump. Now, it was posted just a few months ago, meaning that Laken would have been pregnant at the time it was reported, or at least posted, and we'll talk more about that during our interview. Now, other posts of Laken's are also coming to light highlight since her arrest too, like these ones. Some are calling these photos a maternity shoot. She appears to be Laken putting her hands on her bum alongside Connor Jordan. So that begs the question, did she know she was pregnant? Another TikTok shows things about Laken's appearance and her personality. It's things like her eye and hair color, her favorite season, and her favorite color. But under the title Goals, you can see what appears to be a mother holding a baby, indicating that one of Laken's future goals is to become a mom. And that also begs the question, was Laken planning to be a mom and something just went terribly wrong? On August 27th, Lexington, Kentucky police were dispatched to a home on Park Avenue for reports of an unresponsive infant. They arrived to find a baby wrapped in a towel and black garbage bag placed in the closet. Investigators say Laken admitted she'd given birth to the baby and then attempted to clean up the evidence of her delivery. Lexington police have since confirmed all of this, releasing in a statement that Laken Snelling is the mother of the baby. Several days later, on August 31st, Laken was arrested. She was charged with multiple counts, including abuse of a corpse, tampering with physical evidence, and concealing the birth of an infant. Laken appeared in court last week, where she pleaded not guilty to those charges. At the time, a lot of people were discussing her appearance, too. She was wearing a bright red outfit and matching red lipstick. And she was also there accompanied by her father. She was released on a $100,000 bond and is now living with her family in her home state of Tennessee. And that leads us to Laken's history prior to college. While she went to university in Kentucky, she's originally from White Pine, Tennessee, which is just outside of Knoxville. She went to Jefferson County High School there, and since news of her arrest broke, we've learned more about Laken's life pre-arrest. One of her former classmates told the Daily Mail, quote, she was obsessed with her appearance, very obsessed with being popular and fitting in. This woman went on to say, quote, Laken had many people that she took her personal anger out on. My sister was one of them. While in high school, she tried to run over one of my closest friends with her Jeep. The bullying got so bad, my friend had to be pulled out of school and transferred to another because Laken had taken it so far. Since her arrest, we haven't heard much from Laken about these high school allegations or the criminal allegations against her either. However, again, she did confess to police that she put the baby boy in a trash bag following her delivery. But there's still a major question there. Was the baby stillborn, or did he die after being delivered? Last week, investigators revealed the cause of death was inconclusive. So at the time of this reporting, the baby boy's cause and manner of death are still unknown. So we learned some new details in this case, but really that just means we have even more questions. So let's bring on today's guest to hopefully give us some answers. Today's guest is former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney Serena Townsend. Serena, as always, thank you for coming on stand and talking with us about this case. And let's start with the news info first, right? One of the ex-boyfriends is now doing a DNA paternity test. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a big deal because obviously, you want to know who this baby belongs to. It's easy to tell.
As a military spouse, it was really important to me to find a program that understood my specific needs and getting the same high-quality education.
Tell who it belonged to mother-wise, but father-wise, you really do need a DNA test to make that determination. And it's just a very sad situation. Imagine you're one of these men or boys who may or may not have just lost a child. It's just a very sad situation. So I feel badly for whoever is doing that DNA test and whatever the result, because if it is your child, then that is a horrible, horrible way to lose a child and find out about it. And if it's not your child, it's still kind of like just a very depressing situation because you're not sure what's going on.
Right, these guys are in limbo right now. We don't know for sure if it's mine, if it's not. Do we want it to be mine? Do we not? I'm sure they're going through a whole slew of options in relation to all of this. And I mean, I think one of the reasons why this case is getting so much attention is there's so many unanswered questions. Did these guys know whether they were, the father of this baby? Did they know that Laken was pregnant? We still don't know all of this information, hence the paternity and the DNA test. We know for sure one of the men is definitely getting a DNA test. His father confirmed it to outlets. But would investigators want to talk to the other potential father too?
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes these DNA tests don't take that long to figure out, and so, maybe they'll just wait to see. But certainly, if the DNA test shows that this person is not the father, then the search continues, the investigation continues into who the father actually is. She may not even know who the father is, let's be honest, So I think a DNA test now and possibly one in the future is ready to happen.
So what happens then when we do actually find out who the father is? Because the DNA should show, a positive or a negative depending on these two men. Eventually we will know the identity of the father. At the time of this recording we don't, but one day we eventually will. Then what happens? Is it possible this person could face any charges?
It is interesting. I mean, on the one hand, you see this man wanting to know who the baby belongs to, and so in that sense, you almost feel like he's probably not culpable in any of this, because why would he otherwise put himself out there? A lot is going to depend on the investigation. Like you just said, we don't know a ton of things. We don't even know if the baby was born alive or not. At the time, I'm sure we'll get into that. There's just a ton of unanswered questions, including what and how much participation the father or anybody else really had to do with this. Because let's be honest, she may not have been doing this alone. She may not have discarded this baby alone. She may have had help. She may have disclosed this to somebody before, during, after. Like we just don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
At this point.
The reason that we're talking about this case, I think this is our third video now where we're talking about Laken Snelling, is everything you just said, because we don't know. We want to know, was this a stillborn? Was this something where the baby came out healthy and then, she decided to put it into the trash bag? These are still question marks that we have because they haven't been released to the public. But I'm wondering if investigators know more than they're letting on to us. I mean, some of the things I've speculated in the past, is it possible that she knew she was pregnant and she just wanted to have a home birth and then, had a stillborn baby and did the best she could cleaning up? Is that something, if that's the truth, and again, that's speculation, but if that's what happened, do you think investigators know that at this point?
I think that they're going to have to wait until the medical examiner determines a cause of death. I think a medical examiner is going to be able, at least, maybe not completely conclusively, but they're going to probably be able to tell whether the baby was born alive or not, and the methodology of the death if the baby was born alive. There should be some sort of signs with respect to the body, whether the baby had been breathing or not when it was born, and so here's hoping that kind of science helps solve this case, to be honest, and that we'll go from there, because depending on what the ME finds out, the medical examiner is going to determine a lot of the charges or non-charges in this case.
It's interesting because we do have some information from the medical officials who went through this, the information being that it's inconclusive at this time. We don't know cause and manner of death, which is interesting to me because we did our first story and it was still a question mark. Then our second story on this case was the update, it's inconclusive. Now that's still the case right now, and I guess that's my question for you. In other cases that you've practiced, does this sometimes happen where the ME does its cursory, investigation and it comes back inconclusive? We still don't know and have to go back for a deeper dive in tests?
It does happen, and in fact, it's something that her defense attorney can utilize down the road. Because if they do come to a conclusion later on that inculpates her, something that makes her look more guilty, the fact that they originally did not have an answer or did not know for sure is really ripe for cross-examination by her defense attorney if this case were to ever go to trial. You could even cross-examine the ME and say, like, look, there was a ton of public and private pressure on you to come to a conclusion here. Is it possible that you made a mistake or that you really just wanted to give some closure to some people and that's why you came up with what you came up with? So if they do come back with a devastating result to her, meaning that the baby was born alive and that she did more than just, discard the baby, but actually killed the baby, You know, these are the types of things where there's a crack in the prosecution if it goes down that road.
And honestly, that's where my mind went initially when researching this case, simply because this, unfortunately, is not the first time I've ever covered a case like this, where we have a young woman who, in other cases I've covered, has eventually been convicted of murder in that she gave birth, didn't want the baby. I've seen other similar cases where they put the baby in a trash bag. I've reported on literally multiple of them. So this isn't a completely unheard of situation, and that's kind of where my mind went with all of this. And then when we have the trash bag, the towel, putting this baby in the closet, I mean, that to me, I've said it before, but it really does scream some sort of consciousness of guilt. Hiding the baby, putting it in a closet. What are your thoughts about those actions?
It does. I mean, it shows to me, I'm still going to reserve judgment, Sierra. And the reason why is because these cases are a little different than, and you reported on these cases, you're right. It's certainly consciousness of guilt in a certain way. And it's definitely a sign and very strong evidence that she did not want this baby to be discovered. That being said, there's a lot of different ways to explain why she did what she did and why she felt that way. Even some innocent explanations. I mean, if she was just devastated by a stillborn birth and felt, you know, all of these
He's a narcissistic sociopath.
devastated by a stillborn birth and felt, you know, all of these feelings of guilt, and the hormones are crazy in that moment. And she's certainly not a doctor. She doesn't really know what to do, and she might have just felt like, well, what else am I going to do? I'm so ashamed. I'm so scared. You know, it's possible. You know, and it also just goes to show you the panic in her mind, because look, obviously this was going to be discovered. From my understanding, like, she was visibly pregnant, so somebody is going to ask a question when she doesn't have a baby anymore. And so it almost feels like a panicked moment. That being said, yeah, I mean, the other explanation is way worse, which is she did give birth to a healthy baby. She didn't want the baby, and she killed the baby. And, you know, I hate to think of it that way, but that's another plausible ending to this investigation.
And I'm glad you pointed this out, Serena, because at this time, first of all, she's innocent until proven guilty. She only has these charges wagered against her. She's pleaded not guilty to all of them. And by the way, has not been charged with homicide, murder, anything like that, which we'll get to in a minute. But I'm glad that you pointed this out, because it truly could be something so tragic like this. She's a young woman. I've never gone into labor. I don't know what it's like. I'm sure it's the same for her. Your first baby, you don't necessarily know. Maybe she wanted to give birth at home. A lot of women are doing this. This is something that people can kind of prepare for, watch videos. But anytime you're giving birth for the first time, you don't know what you're doing. So could it have been that? Could it have simply been this tragedy, that it was a stillborn baby? And if that comes out, I hope that it does, and we can all really report on that this is just this young woman who didn't know what to do. Maybe she thought she was cleaning up. And again, so many questions about this. It could really be one or the other situation. Either way, a tremendous tragedy about this baby and, you know, the life that unfortunately was not able to be lived. And I guess that kind of leads into my next question about all of these charges that she faces, specifically that there is no homicide, manslaughter, murder charge. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I don't think anybody could prove homicide or murder at this point, and that is all going to go back to, there's a lot of things to build on this case. The biggest thing is what the ME comes up with, whether the autopsy really gives us an understanding of the condition of the baby upon birth. That's going to be a huge piece of this, and then the prosecution is going to build off of that. So, for example, small things that may not seem important are going to be very relevant, like, did she get prenatal care? Was she taking care of herself and this baby for all of those months while pregnant? What are the kinds of statements that she made to friends and family? Was she excited to have the baby? Was she reluctant? Was she, you know, regretting it? Was she scared? What, you know, all of the things that kind of fill in the gaps that we don't have right now are going to build the story that the prosecution is going to want to put forth, and of course the defense as well. So I think, first of all, homicide charges are totally inappropriate at this very moment, because you have to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt as to not only what her mindset was, but whether the baby was actually alive or not at the time of birth. These are major, major things that do not have answers, let alone evidence that gives you beyond a reasonable doubt proof.
You mentioned prenatal care, and I think this is something that investigators will easily be able to follow up on. Whether she went to the doctor, we can easily look at my chart, for instance, and see, okay, yeah, she did go to the doctor on XYZ day. She did know she was pregnant. Right now, we don't have this information, so some people are speculating maybe she didn't know. Maybe it's like that show on TLC or whatever it is, I didn't know I was pregnant. That's a possible route. But then additionally, new information that's come to light is one of the reasons we focused on this case, honestly, let's be real, is that she was a collegiate cheerleader, and that's something, very front-facing. And there's some videos out there showing what people now, in hindsight, believe she looks pregnant. She looks as though she has a bump, and she's participating in this cheerleading. So is it a situation where I didn't know I was pregnant, I thought I was gaining some weight, I wanted to work out and perform my cheerleading competition? Okay, great, yes, that. Or is it possibly that she did go to these doctor's appointments? She did know that she was pregnant and she's still participating. I mean, a lot of people are really looking at that because she was, she wasn't on the ground, she was lifted up, she was risen. If she has a baby, that's dangerous, that you're pregnant both for the baby and for yourself. What are your thoughts on all of that?
It's such a great point, and again, goes back to what her mens rea is, what her thought process was throughout this pregnancy and at the time of the birth. On the one hand, people are going to say, look, she didn't care enough about the baby, she cared more about herself. She continued her cheerleading career at the risk of harming the baby.
Hey, 18.
And look, maybe there's people who make the argument that
Hey,
for
18.
all of those risky behaviors, the baby, if it was stillborn, would have been born healthy had she taken better precautions. And unknown,
Be
and
right
how
back.
these little details could help fill in what the eventual storyline might be by the prosecution. Because I agree, like if she was, on the other hand, if she just didn't know and she thought she was gaining weight, then there would have not been a reason for her to stop the cheerleading. Again, also,
You got
maybe
three
she's
of
just very young and
And all you want
doesn't
is one?
necessarily appreciate the risks that she put her baby into by doing those things, but then you start thinking about maybe a negligent homicide type of charge where she knew or should have known that the things that she was doing would be harmful to this baby. It's a very interesting kind of puzzle that needs to be solved with all of these little pieces. And again, it goes back also to that prenatal care. Did her doctors know about her activities? Did she disclose it? Was she told to stop? And did she go against her doctor's orders?
You talked about mens rea in all of this too, which is interesting because a lot of people are focusing on the question mark of if you did know that you were pregnant, and let's say you didn't want to have the baby and become a mom right
We're
now.
back.
There's adoption. That's an option. There's foster care.
Of course.
I think a lot of people are also pointing to the fact that abortion had been outlawed, so that wasn't an option for her. A lot of people are really, and by the way, these are Monday
Yeah,
morning
just put the
quarterbacks
baby
who are
up for
saying, oh,
adoption.
abortion was outlawed. You just threw out the baby head up in the garbage bag. However, do you think that that little aspect, all of this little fact, is relevant to the case?
I do. I mean, I don't think it's relevant to the eventual charges. I don't think that any prosecutor is going to say, well, she simply didn't have a choice and therefore it's not her fault. It's okay that she killed this baby or that she put it in a trash. I don't.
Not only did she have multiple choices, if I remember correctly, there's at least 31 different kinds of things that women can use to not get pregnant. And mind you, this is a young lady who, from what I'm looking at, comes from money. So I don't know what the problem is.
I think so, but I do think the general topic of conversation is an important one. Would we be in this situation? Would she be in this situation? Would that poor baby have been in this situation had she been able to, have that abortion very early on and resolve any issues that she may have had? Now you have a potential murder on your hands rather than, something that could have been handled much earlier, sooner, safer, and without criminal charges.
It's so sad to talk about this case because, just in this interview with you and I, we've gone down so many different routes because there are so many unanswered questions, but I'm really glad you brought up the baby
A
boy
lot
in
of
the office,
unanswered
because it is
questions.
the through line. The fact that a life was lost here is a tragedy, is the very bottom line. And I'm sure prosecutors are going to want some form of justice in all of this. And this is another reason I love talking to you, Serena, because you bring the criminal defense attorney side, but also the former prosecutor. So if we're going to the former prosecutor side of you, and those people, the ones who are bringing charges or who have brought charges already, we talked about, potentially her doctor's opinions, the background, did she know she was pregnant, etc. I know they're going to want to work with the medical examiner and all of that, but would they talk to doctors about, what about her prenatal care should she have been doing? What did she do? Things like that.
Yes, for sure. And a lot of it, though, is going to depend on what she knew or should have known. It's one thing to bring a doctor, an expert doctor to the stand and say, like, here's what I would have encouraged her to do. But a lot of it is more about what she actually knew and what was reasonable for her to know. And so a lot of it will really come down to her doctor and her doctor appointments and her activities and her potential admissions to friends, family, police, about what she was thinking during all of this. So, as a former prosecutor, I understand why they came up with these these charges right now are what they believe they can prove. The fact that she moved this baby, hid the baby, discarded the baby, all of those things, I think they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, especially because it's my understanding that she basically admitted to doing that to the police. So I think it's an understandable way for the prosecution to have proceeded at this point, which is to kind of bookmark these charges and say, look, these are the charges that are happening right now, but guess what? If we find out more about this situation that leads us to believe we have proof beyond a reasonable doubt that you murdered this baby, we can supersede the indictment and add charges of murder or however they want to do it, negligent homicide, depending on the facts as they come out. So this indictment is not necessarily the last we're going to see of the charges.
You brought up something really interesting, that agreed to report she did admit, yeah, I was trying to clean things up. Not necessarily guilt, but yeah, okay, I did put the baby in the trash bag. However, when these charges came down, she pleaded not guilty. So can you explain that or make sense of those two juxtaposition things there?
Yeah, it happens all the time. And the difference between her original statement and her not guilty statement is that there is a lawyer now involved. Essentially, which is the right thing to do, right? Like most people, this is why I tell my clients all the time, do not speak to any law enforcement without an attorney present, and that attorney's probably just going to tell you not to speak at all. They ask her questions, she's vulnerable, she's going to answer them, she's going to give them what she thinks is going to help her case, where she doesn't realize that they're actually going to use those statements against her. But it is pretty much standard practice for people to plead not guilty, especially in a case like this, where the results, if pleaded guilty, are devastating. I mean, if she just pled guilty, then, she could basically just face the maximum sentence right then and there. It's
Yeah.
standard practice to plead not guilty at the outset so that your lawyer could negotiate a better deal for you, or so that you could really build your side of the case. Not that the burden of proof ever shifts to a defendant, but you want to be able to see what the evidence is and to kind of give a counterpoint to the prosecutors and say, like, look, this was not what we think it is. Let the lawyers do their jobs and try to get her a better disposition. So it's not contradictory for her to have made those statements and then plead not guilty.
And this is the perfect segue into the defense side of things. The fact that we talked about the prosecution so much matters on not what should she have done, but what did she know to do as far as her education regarding pregnancy, etc. And I'm wondering about the defense, if perhaps that's something they would highlight. Hey, you know what? She didn't go to, maternity classes. This was the first time she was pregnant. She had no idea about all of these things. She's a young woman in her early 20s. She didn't know she needed to not be cheerleading at the time. She didn't know how to give birth. She didn't know the signs of labor, etc. Is that what they would focus on then?
Yes, I mean, her statement that she cleaned up and everything, that kind of already connects her with the crime in such a way that nobody's going to be able to really argue that that part didn't happen. So you're going to have to make the argument that everything that she did, including that, was innocent. That essentially, perhaps she knew she was pregnant and she did everything right. She went to her doctors. She listened to their advice. Maybe the doctors said, in your early trimesters, you can still cheerlead. You just have to be a little careful. And maybe she took better precautions later on down the road. Maybe her water broke at home and she was planning on going to the hospital, but she didn't realize what was going on. And then the baby was born, stillborn, and there was nothing that she or anybody could have done. So that narrative, if true or if plausible under the evidence, is a way to really escape from liability here, at least criminal liability.
Truly such a troubling case all around, with so many questions that we still have that I'm hoping we one day will find out soon. Serena Townsend, thank you for coming on and walking us through the case.
Thank you so much for having me, as always.
Laken Snelling is due back in court on September 26th for her next appearance. Meanwhile, we'll keep following the case for any future updates and bring them to you right here on Scandal. That's all we've got for today's episode, though. Make sure you subscribe to our channel for the latest in this case and all other top true crime stories. You can reach out to us too at scandal@lawnprime.com and find me personally on social media like Instagram @Sierra Gillespie. Thanks for watching today's episode of Scandal. I'm your host, Sierra Gillespie, and I'll see you next time.
And here comes the last part, y'all.
New details in the death of Laken Snelling's newborn son. Investigators now say the beauty queen cheerleader wasn't even home when first responders found the baby boy, who was reportedly
She wasn't even home?
to the touch. This is Scandal, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Sierra Gillespie. The case of Laken Snelling has been a question mark since the very beginning. Namely, why would a young mother literally throw away her newborn baby? New answers are finally starting to trickle in, including reports that it wasn't Laken herself who called police. It was someone else who found the baby wrapped in a trash bag in her closet. It seems as though Laken wasn't even there at the time, and many are questioning whether she showed any sense of urgency at all, given that the baby was reportedly cold to the touch when first responders arrived. I want to dig more into all of this new information, but first, I want to make sure that everyone is up to speed on the case as a whole. The defendant is 21-year-old Laken Snelling, a one-time beauty queen and cheerleader from the University of Kentucky. For some background, Laken is from White Pine, Tennessee, just outside of Knoxville, where she attended Jefferson County High School. We've learned more about Laken's high school days since news of her arrest. According to interviews with her classmates, she was a, quote, serial bully. Former classmate Sydney Height told the Daily Mail, quote, she was obsessed with her appearance, very obsessed with being popular and fitting in. Sydney also said, quote, Laken had many, many people that she took her personal anger out on. My sister was one of them. While in high school, she tried to run over one of my closest friends with her Jeep. The bullying got so bad, my friend had to be pulled out of school and transferred to another because Laken had taken it so far. Laken herself has been pretty tight-lipped about these high school bullying rumors, but also about her time at the University of Kentucky. This semester, Laken was set to be a senior at UK. She was majoring in interdisciplinary disability studies. Now, while at UK, Laken was part of the cheerleading stunt team. According to the university, she cheered with the team for 3 years before she dropped out of school just this semester. As news of Laken's allegations made the rounds, old videos resurfaced, showing what appears to be a visibly pregnant Laken cheering. And not just standing, waving her arms around. Laken is seen in the video being held up by fellow cheerleaders and assisting another cheerleader performing a stunt. It's raising some eyebrows because the video was posted just a few months ago, meaning Laken would in fact have been pregnant at the time. But that's not the only social media post that has gotten attention. Like any college senior in her early 20s, Laken posted a lot of pictures and videos. And one that's really standing out now is a TikTok that Laken posted, basically telling the world about herself. Things like her hair color, her eye color, her favorite season. But what really is standing out is under goals. You can see what appears to be the emoji of a mother holding a baby, basically meaning that one of Laken's future goals is to become a mom. And that once again begs the question, was Laken planning to be a mom and something just went terribly wrong? If she wanted to be a mom, why would she put her baby in a trash bag? Now there's also what appears to be a maternity photo shoot that Laken posted prior to her arrest, and that leads into the next mystery. Who is the father of Laken's baby? The man in that maternity shoot is Connor Jordan, who we believe to be Laken's most recent boyfriend. What we know about Connor is he played collegiate basketball and attended a couple of different universities, including Tusculum University, Lincoln Memorial University, and King University. Since news of Laken's arrest broke, Connor has deleted social media, but prior to that, on Laken's account, there are multiple pictures of them together. We don't exactly know the timeline of Laken's relationship with Connor, but we do know that before Connor, she was connected to a different collegiate athlete, 21-year-old Isaiah Hall, who played quarterback at the University of the Cumberlands in Williamsburg, Kentucky. According to the New York Post, Isaiah dated Laken most recently before Connor, and he could be the father of her baby. His father told the Post, Lexington police had him come down to the station to give a sample. I don't know anything on this, and we don't know if Isaiah is the father or not. All of that leads us to Lexington, Kentucky, home of UK and the scene of the crime. And here's where some of that new information comes into play. According to Fox 56 out of Kentucky, a 911 call came into dispatch at about 10:35 a.m. on Wednesday, August 27th for reports of a baby that had been discovered. According to reports, dispatch noted complainant just found a dead baby in a closet. It is cold to the touch. Now, we don't know who this person is that called 911, but we do know it wasn't Laken. According to reports, she wasn't even home at the time this call came in, or when first responders arrived. Fire crews arrived in just about 1 minute, and police got there about 7 minutes later. When they all arrived, officials found a newborn baby boy wrapped in a towel and garbage bag that had been placed in the closet. At about 11:18 a.m., the University of Kentucky Police Department was asked to be part of the investigation. A statement from them reads in part, quote, the UK Police Department frequently works with the Lexington Police Department to ensure the safety of our campus community. That can include requests for assistance in locating an individual on campus in connection with a crime or concerns for the individual's safety. In this instance, UK PD, while asked to assist, did not locate or make contact with this individual on August 27th. Fox 6 reports that Laken was considered under arrest at 4:58 p.m. that day when investigators eventually found her. However, she wasn't booked in jail until a few days later on August 31st. Investigators say when they spoke to her, Laken admitted she had given birth to the baby and then attempted to clean up the evidence of her delivery. Lexington police have since confirmed this, releasing in a statement that Laken Snelling is the mother of the baby. Laken has since been charged with multiple counts, including abuse of a corpse, tampering with physical evidence, and concealing the birth of an infant. A lot of people are questioning, why is there no charge of murder or manslaughter? It's possible that one could be added.
Yeah,
but
why is there not
it's still
manslaughter
too
charge?
early. That's because the cause and manner of the baby's death are inconclusive. A statement from the coroner reads in part, quote, I understand the community's concern and sensitivity surrounding the death of a child. We are conducting a thorough and methodical death investigation to ensure all facts are carefully considered. More tests are now being run so we can hopefully soon have a better idea of what happened to that baby boy. Meanwhile, Laken pleaded not guilty to the charges and has since been released on $100,000 bond and is back living with her family in Tennessee. That brings you up to speed as to where we are right now in the case, but I do want to dig a bit deeper into some of the new information we have. So let's bring on today's expert guest. It's retired NYPD Detective David Sarney. David, thank you for coming on with us today, and I wanted to ask about that new info. The fact that Laken allegedly is not the one who called 911. The defendant here is not the person who reached out to authorities. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's something very important. I know that, and I'm going to presume that the investigators spoke to 911 in depth, because you want to know how they knew that the baby was in the closet. What was the nexus between the 911 call and the location of the dead baby? And that's the thing also. We thought that Laken made the call, and now we're realizing she didn't. So this adds another level The baby was apparently cold, so there must have been some sort of birth prior to of the baby. We don't, and this is the again we have to figure out where the baby was alive, being born or not. But the thing, the reality is when you have Laken leaving the location and not being found for about an hour or so, she went to do whatever she was doing, and that's why it's important when we do these interrogations to find out what their timeline was, when they left the apartment, when they left the location. So now you have a time of where the body is located. Now you want to find out anything about the person of interest, the suspect at this point, and you have to put Laken as suspect number one in a possible murder investigation. Right now, it's not a homicide right now, but it is a death investigation.
What are you most looking forward to at this Vid Summit?
Meeting more people. I love meeting creators. Big Summit is right back.
But it is a death investigation.
You brought up something really interesting. The person who called 911, not Laken. We don't know
Who is
they
this
are.
person?
I assume that police do know who they are. We just haven't, received their
I
name,
wanna know
their
who is
relation
this
to Laken.
person?
What happened? Did they see the birth? I'm sure these are questions investigators would ask that person because they were first on the scene. I mean, do you agree they would ask these things?
Yeah, and this is part of what the investigation takes place. And once FD, the fire department, came to, they identify the body, they get to the body is dead. Police get notified, or they're notified on scene. It all depends on how it worked. Usually with EMS, they'll respond first, and the police department come later after notification. That scene had to be secured immediately, and that's important to understand that scene is a crime scene. It's a crime scene at this point, and the investigators will work from that 911 call, and they haven't identified the 911 call, and that's fine. You don't always want to put leaks out, because what happens is when they have a person that they've spoken to, that name gets leaked out or put out there, you're going to see a lot of news networks that are going after this person, and you want to keep them as sterile in your investigation as possible, so you don't want to get their name released.
I mean, you're right. If I knew the name of the 911 caller, no doubt our booking producers would be reaching out to see, could they talk to us? Could they give us a description? Because honestly, we have so many questions about what happened, which is why we're doing the interview today, because we do have a couple of new tidbits of information, including the fact that you referenced Laken was not there at the time of this 911 call. It kind of took a while for investigators to track her down. Is that something investigators are going to want to figure out? Hey, why weren't you here at the time? Where were you going? What were you up to?
Those are questions I guarantee they were asked by the investigators, by the detectives, or whoever the investigators are. That's a very important point. This is where you're going to have to determine, and you're not going to get the full interrogation, at least from into the media, or released to the media, because what they did is they created a timeline, and that's what comes down to, the timeline of when she left that location, what she did, when she did it, and it could be in a very non-confrontational way, which I would probably best do myself. It's non-confrontational, but looking to put guilt on somebody, but trying to get an understanding of where they were when this thing happened, and how hard they pressed to determine whether the baby was born alive or not. That may have taken place, may not have taken place. But when it comes to these investigations, we have to wait to get the facts of the entire story before we can do what we did, or do what we do. So in this case, what the investigators had, they had enough to determine that she went at the crime scene, and she was attempting to dispose of the body based on the garbage bags there, so you have enough probable cause to make the arrest on that. As far as anything further right now, they don't have anything pending. And, in New York, we have the NYPD and the OCB's office here in New York, the Chief of Examiner. We call these type of cases a copy. The circumstances unknown any police investigation. And it's going to be based on what the police obtain information-wise to determine the facts of what happened to this baby. Was this baby born alive or not? Did something happen? And that would be questions between that and the medical examiner to determine on the secondary autopsy and the more studies upon the body of this baby to determine what happened.
And I think that's why people keep clicking on this story. We want to know what happened to this baby. And what's interesting
what
right
happened
now is that
exactly?
manner and cause of death are inconclusive right
Was
now.
this on purpose or was this an accident? That's what we want to know.
But one of the new pieces of information that we do have is when investigators arrived to the scene, the baby was cold, meaning that this didn't just happen instantaneously. Obviously, Laken had left the premises, so she wasn't even there. But to me, when I hear the fact that this baby was cold upon the arrival of emergency responders, to me that shows no sense of urgency here. If there was something that went wrong, if a woman was giving birth, something's going wrong, my baby isn't breathing, they aren't crying, I'm calling 911. This is me, Sierra, saying this. What are your thoughts about that? The fact that when they arrived, this wasn't a brand newborn, the baby was unfortunately cold.
You would think so. You would think someone called 911. But apparently, if you look at the backstory of Laken, is she did the pregnancy. She came off of social media a few months prior. It seems to be maybe, that's why the investigations take place with family, friends, loved ones, anyone that she'd come to contact with. Did she ever talk about being pregnant? Was this something that she kept hidden? Apparently, social media-wise, she did. And if you're not calling 911, two things are in place here. There's several actually. If you just speculate on this, she was embarrassed to do it. She was too scared to do it, or she had no intention of ever calling. And that's something you're going to find out, and that's why the telephone records are a deep dive into her computer. If there's any searches dealing with babies, dealing with fetal care, anything along those lines, those are things that come into play. Any relationship, and that's why they're getting DNA from possible relationships they had to determine who the father is. Because someone online, someone had to be known at one point. It's very difficult to hide something like this, especially in this day and age of social media and how people talk. But this is, that's why you have to look at, they look at Laken hard and say, did something nefarious happen to the baby? And that's what we're looking at. That's what investigators are looking to find out. But and if you look at other attorneys, babies died. Maybe the baby took a breath and died. Or the baby was born stillborn, but that's going to be up to the medical examiner's office.
Exactly.
As far as law enforcement is concerned, we have to abide by what the medical doctors
Follow the law and follow the medical evidence. Right.
And that's the question that we all have, right? Because unfortunately, many of us know someone, maybe even have experienced ourselves, a miscarriage or a stillbirth that does sadly happen from time to time. And that's a big question here. Is that what happened, or was the baby born, breathing, healthy, and then something happened before it ended up in the trash bag and was pronounced
What
dead?
happened?
And it's really going to depend on what the medical examiner finds before we could have any sort of charges. Because as you yourself brought up, there's no sort of homicide charges relating to all of this. They're more simpler charges, I guess, based on the allegations of her putting the baby in the trash bag. So, if we're going to get any sort of homicide, manslaughter charge, what do you think the ME would have to find in order to get prosecutors to bring that sort of charge?
Well, the condition of the baby right now, they saw no blood force trauma or anything that would have caused injury to the baby's body at this time. The questions come back to where's the placenta? Where's the umbilical cord? Was the umbilical cord removed? And if it was removed, the placenta, where is it? That's why she had a charge. But again, that's one thing. We're not getting full information, and I think it's a good thing because investigators don't want to leave everything out, because then you'll have people, unfortunately, intellect schools putting things in, kind of muddying up the waters. They're going to try to keep this investigation as thorough as possible. They have a suspect who's been arrested for the attempted crime scene, tampering, attempted to remove a baby, fetus or body, pet body. Those are, Class D felonies. But you're looking to see, in the end, this is what investigators always do. Investigators look for the truth, and that's the important aspect. And that's going to come from the totality of circumstances, their investigation after the fact, and their conferral with the ME's office, and anything that comes to shed to light this. And that's why it's very important to have a very nuanced investigation when it comes to babies, because there is no complaint. No one knew about this baby at all, apparently. How did the baby die? And that's something that we can't answer, but we can answer the facts of what she
what happened
prior to and after. And then we can do the ME's office and then confer with them to determine. That's a lot of questions have to be very nuanced within the ME's office.
And I do want to play devil's advocate here, because at the time of this recording, once again, we don't know the cause and manner of death. So is it possible that something nefarious happened here? Yes, absolutely. However, is it also possible that this is a 21-year-old woman who's, she's in her senior year of college, she's pregnant, and all of a sudden she tries to give birth, it's her first time, it's stillborn, and she cleans it up because she's in a weird state of shock, hormones, etc., that's possible too. I want to make sure that we're covering our bases. And to your point, I'm sure investigators are doing all of that too to look through the options and kind of waiting on the medical examiner. I did want to circle back to something that you pointed out earlier, though, is that we don't know who the father is. And there are a couple of options here. This is very important to figure out, who else could be involved in this. We have at least one person who provided DNA. Of course, investigators are going to be looking at that. Is it positive, negative, match, yes or no? What happens when investigators determine who the father is? Do they talk to him?
Well, definitely, there could be sort of an interview with that, obviously, because you want to make sure if they knew something. And that's, the benefit of that, if you speak to that person, you get their cell phone records, and you can do cell site searches and you look for cell sites where they were at certain times to either refute or confirm what they're saying to. That's the importance of doing all these investigations, is we want to make sure we get the right information at the right time. And that's why we want to talk to everybody. Anyone involved in this case, we want to make sure we get the right person for it.
And I know this is something that you had previously mentioned in this too, that we're going to go through Laken's social media and her text messages, what she was talking about. And I think if this were to lead down the route of a murder investigation, we would want to know those things if she was willingly trying to cover this up, if there was intent in any way, because if prosecutors one day down the line, depending on what the ME finds, do want to bring a, let's say, first-degree murder charge, they want to have the intent there. So I think that's something, in addition to looking through the text messages of this boyfriend, the father, they're going to want to do too. And I guess that's my question for you. If this does become a murder investigation, how does that shift from where it's at right now?
It shifts. It doesn't necessarily shift the investigators, because investigators are the ones who are gathering the evidence to determine that. And when they bring it to the prosecutor's office, the prosecutor, and this is, I teach college at John Jay College in New York City, and we talk about the elements of crime might be here, the attendant circumstances, the act itself, and the intent. We have to determine the intent, and that's something that police don't do really. We have a couple mental states, knowingly, recklessly, and this is a knowing or reckless action by Laken. We have to determine that based on evidence available. Then that takes to the prosecutor's office, and they have the discretion or not whether to levy the charges against her, consistent, keep the charges as we have it now. Right now we have D felony charges about the body, but nothing enough substantial to the DA's office in order to do this, and that's what it comes down to. It's a matter of what the detectives, the investigators here are able to find and determine, and that's why these cases are so sensitive, especially baby cases, because one, as you can see, there's been such a push on this, and it's a big media thing. But and when it deals with babies, I've worked with investigators who don't want to work with babies; they just refuse to work with baby deaths. It's difficult. It's a difficult thing to see. Your biases cannot be involved. What you're looking for is the truth. You're trying to get that information, so when the prosecutor has it, they make the decision. We do not, as law enforcement, make the decision whether or not to charge that person. We have based on probable cause, but if they don't think there's enough probable cause, they may not defer to prosecute based on what they're prosecuting right now, based on the fact they have enough evidence for what they have, for the baby's body and the tampering. But when it comes to the death, that's where the ME's office and the scientist and scientific aspect element to this takes over. But if we can say that there was an intent by her to recklessly do what she did or intentionally kill the baby, that'll have to come out in the evidence that we find. That's really what it is. It's not about what I think, it's what I can prove.
And again, this is all speculation for our viewers right now. These sort of charges, murder, homicide, manslaughter, nothing like that has been brought. It's just what we're talking about, because it could be down the line, once again, pending whatever the ME finds in their investigation as they dig a little bit deeper. We do know she has pleaded not guilty to several of the charges. I mean, talking about the tampering with evidence, the allegations of putting the baby into the trash bag. And what's interesting to me about this is she's pleaded not guilty there. However, when she spoke with police, she did sort of fess up in a way and say, yeah, I did put the baby in the trash bag. I was trying to clean up. Those two, I guess, opposite ideas here, the fact that she says to police, yeah, I did it, versus her pleading not guilty. What are your thoughts about that?
One of the benefits is, and I always say about the criminal justice system, regardless if we make an arrest or not, and this is something people do may not like it, but the reality is you're innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. So she's not admitting to, and she admitted to the police one thing, but when she goes to, she's going to say there's not enough evidence to prosecute me for that. That's what we're looking to do. The office of detectives investigators had nothing to arrest her. Probable cause is way different than beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's what that's what the prosecutor office has to develop, have the evidence from the detectives and involved, and anything that they can find on their end, and then bring that. And if they determine they cannot prosecute that, because without, they can do several things. They can reduce the charges. They could not charge at all, dismiss the charges, or not even prosecute the case at all for a murder investigation. And unfortunately, my office, we've had these type of baby deaths, and there are times babies, we do have babies that die, and that's going back to that. Is this just a baby's death where she was either, panicked, and she decided to leave? Panic is the issue I have. Is if she had this birth early, and this is where the question comes in, hopefully it was asked, why did you not remove the body when you left? Why did you leave the body there? And hopefully that was a question that was asked, because that may determine whether or not she was ever intending to disclose this death. Not only that, was she intending to hide this because something was done? Again, this is all speculation, but that would hopefully have come out during the interview/interrogation.
Something you've brought up several times throughout this interview is something I want to highlight for all of our viewers too. We have to remember there was a young life that was lost in all of this, Laken's baby boy. And that is just, the bottom line here. The tragedy that potentially she's mourning, her family. I mean, a life cut so short, and still so many questions about what's ahead in this case. Definitely one we're going to keep following and see where it takes us. David Sarney, thank you for coming on today and breaking down what we do know about the case.
Thank you very much, and stay safe.
From here, Laken Snelling is due back in court on September 26th for her next appearance.
September 26th, y'all remember that.
For now, for the latest updates in this case and all things true crime, make sure to subscribe to our channel. To connect with me personally on social media, you can find me at Sierra Gillespie, and you can send messages our way too at scandal@lawandcrime.com. Thanks for watching today's episode. As always, I'm your host, Sierra Gillespie, and I'll see you next time.
So with that being said, the 26th is where we'll get an update on Laken Snelling. Hopefully we can figure out if this young boy was unalive accidentally or if this was on purpose. With that being said, like, share, subscribe. Enjoy your evening. See you later. Peace.